The Galactic Federation Council chamber looked like someone had shaken a snow globe filled with panic and bureaucracy. Admiral Claxon, whose feathers were perpetually ruffled even on good days, was practically molting from stress as he addressed the emergency session. Esteemed colleagues, Claxon began, his voice cracking like a teenager asking for a prom date. The Vorthan Empire has just conquered the Zeltharian system. That brings their total to 47% of known galactic territory. Chancellor Globert, a slug-like being whose definition of speed was eventually oozed forward in his hover chair. Admiral, surely you're not suggesting we panic over a mere 47% conquest rate? Chancellor, with respect, they're conquering a system every 3 days. At this rate, we'll be extinct before you finish your next sentence. Globert considered this for approximately 30 seconds. Point taken. Unit 47. The Federation's resident artificial intelligence and walking calculator processed the data with mechanical precision. Current probability of Federation survival, 12.7% and declining. Recommended course of action, immediate surrender to minimize casualties. That's your solution? Claxon squawked. Surrender? BZ. It is the most logical course of action given available data. Claxon's tail feathers fanned out in frustration. Well, I have a different idea. And you're all going to hate it. The chamber fell silent, except for Globert's rhythmic slurping sounds. We asked the humans for help. The silence stretched so long that several council members checked if time had stopped working. Finally, Unit 47's optical sensors flickered. Admiral, have you experienced recent head trauma? The humans, Globert wheezed, are barely out of their atmospheric cradle. They haven't even achieved faster than light travel. They're still using chemical rockets like some sort of technological toddlers. Exactly, Claxon said, pacing back and forth like a caffeinated hummingbird. The Vorthans have studied every military doctrine in the galaxy. They've adapted to every strategy, every tactic, every possible approach to warfare. But they've never encountered humans. Because humans are irrelevant, Unit 47 stated with mechanical certainty. Are they, though? Claxon pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's recent activities. In the past 50 years, they've gone from powered flight to orbital stations. They've split the atom, walked on their moon, and somehow convinced themselves that reality television is entertainment. These beings are clearly unhinged. That's not exactly a military qualification, Globert pointed out. Isn't it? The Vorthans pride themselves on logical, efficient warfare. They've conquered half the galaxy using mathematical precision and predictable tactics. But humans... Claxon gestured wildly at the display. Humans once had a war that started because someone shot an archduke. Another war began over a bucket. A bucket, colleagues. These beings operate on pure chaos theory. The council exchanged glances that ranged from skeptical to deeply concerned about Claxon's mental state. And furthermore, NT, Claxon continued, warming to his theme, their military history is frankly terrifying. They've turned everything from kitchen utensils to farming equipment into weapons. They've used sharks, dolphins, and something called a nuclear-powered submarine in warfare. One of their generals once said, "I don't want to just defeat the enemy. I want to make them sorry they were ever born." Unit 47's processors whirred ominously. Kiwet. Admiral, your proposal lacks logical foundation. Logic is exactly what's failing us, Unit 47. The Vorthans can predict logical responses, but can they predict a species that considers hold my beer and watch this to be a valid military strategy? Chancellor Globert shifted uncomfortably in his hover chair. Even if we were to consider this desperate measure, how exactly do we contact them? They don't have interstellar communication. Claxon smiled, showing far too many sharp teeth. We send them a message the old-fashioned way. We go to them. And that's how the most advanced military council in the galaxy decided to knock on humanity's door and ask for help with their little war problem. The message arrived at Cheyenne Mountain on a Tuesday, which was already a bad sign because nothing good ever happened on Tuesdays. Commander Jake Boom Henderson was enjoying his morning coffee and reading incident reports when Lieutenant Rita Numbers Garcia burst into his office like caffeinated lightning. "Sir, we've got a situation," Garcia announced, clutching a tablet that was smoking slightly. "And I mean a big situation. Like aliens are real, and they want our help kind of situation." Jake took another sip of coffee. "Rita, it's Tuesday morning. My capacity for dealing with the impossible doesn't kick in until at least 10 a.m. "Sir, I'm serious. We just received a transmission from something calling itself the Galactic Federation Council. They're asking for military assistance against something called the Vorthan Empire." Jake set down his coffee cup with the careful precision of a man who'd learned that sudden movements led to paperwork. "Rita, are you telling me that aliens have contacted Earth to ask for our help in a space war?" "Yes, sir. And sir, they seem really desperate. Desperate enough to ask the species that hasn't figured out faster than light travel yet. That's what makes it so weird, sir. According to their message, they've tried everything else. Apparently, we're their last resort." Jake leaned back in his chair and grinned. It wasn't a particularly reassuring grin. "Rita, get Dr. Kellerman on the line. Then get me Admiral Morrison, General Patterson, and whoever's running the Coast Guard these days." "Sir, the Coast Guard." "Rita, if we're going to help these aliens with their little problem, we're going to do it right. And doing it right means doing it with everything we've got." Within an hour, Jake found himself on a video conference with the Galactic Federation Council. Admiral Claxon looked even more nervous than usual, while Chancellor Globert appeared to be reconsidering his life choices. "Commander Henderson," Claxon began, "we're grateful for your willingness to assist. We were hoping you could provide a small, elite strike force, perhaps a few dozen of your best soldiers." Jake laughed. Actually laughed. "Admiral, I appreciate the vote of confidence, but humans don't really do small. When we solve problems, we prefer to solve them thoroughly." "What exactly do you mean by thoroughly?" Unit 47 inquired with mechanical curiosity. "Well, let me put it this way. Rita, what's our current military inventory looking like?" Garcia consulted her tablet, which was still smoking. "Sir, we've got 12 aircraft carriers, approximately 8,000 fighter aircraft, 67,000 tanks, and that's not counting the Coast Guard assets." The alien council members exchanged what could only be described as alarmed looks. "Commander," Claxon said carefully, "that seems like a considerable amount of military equipment for a species that hasn't achieved interstellar travel." "Oh, that's just the conventional stuff," Jake replied cheerfully. "Rita, tell them about the fun toys. We also have orbital platforms, satellite networks, nuclear submarines, and Dr. Kellerman's been working on some interesting modifications to our space program." Speaking of whom, Dr. Marcus Mad Science Kellerman chose that moment to join the conference, his lab coat singed and his hair looking like he'd been struck by lightning. "Jake, I heard something about weaponizing our space assets. Please tell me we're finally going to mount railguns on the International Space Station." The alien's silence was deafening. So Jake continued, "When do we start?" What happened next could only be described as the most beautiful disaster the galaxy had ever witnessed. Within 72 hours of receiving the aliens' call for help, every military installation on Earth had transformed into a buzzing hive of activity that would have made an anthill look lazy. Dr. Kellerman had apparently been waiting his entire career for someone to ask him to weaponize everything humanity had ever built. "Jake." "Egg," he said, practically vibrating with excitement. "You know how everyone always says we can't put weapons in space because of treaties? Well, technically, if we're defending aliens, those treaties don't apply. Marcus, please tell me you haven't already started mounting cannons on the space station." "Okay, I won't tell you that. But hypothetically, if I had, they'd be really big cannons." Meanwhile, Garcia was running calculations that made NASA's computers cry. "Sir, based on our current manufacturing capabilities and Dr. Kellerman's modifications, we can have approximately 12,000 space-capable vessels ready within 6 months." The alien observers who had been stationed on Earth to assist with the preparation watched in growing horror as humanity began converting everything that could theoretically fly into a weapon of war. Admiral Claxon, his feathers now permanently disheveled, watched a team of engineers welding missile pods onto a cruise ship. Commander Henderson, is that vessel truly necessary for military operations? Admiral, that's the Pacific Princess. She's got a buffet that serves 3,000 people and enough storage space for 6 months of supplies. In space, logistics is everything. But it's a cruise ship. It's a cruise ship with fusion drives and torpedo launchers. See the difference? Elsewhere, the Coast Guard was having the time of their lives. Captain Murphy, a grizzled veteran who'd spent 30 years rescuing people from their own stupidity, was overseeing the installation of defensive systems on what used to be a fishing trawler. Captain, one of his engineers asked, "Are you sure about mounting depth charges on a spacecraft?" "Son, space is just a really big ocean with worse weather and more things trying to kill you. Depth charges work just fine when you adjust for the environment." Unit 47, attempting to understand human military doctrine, observed a squadron of modified fighter jets. Commander Henderson, your pilots appear to have installed speakers on their aircraft. Psychological warfare, Unit 47. Inia, nothing ruins an enemy's concentration quite like having Baby Shark played at full volume during combat. Your species weaponizes children's music? Unit 47, we weaponize everything. Last week, someone in RD figured out how to turn a microwave into a directed energy weapon. Dr. Kellerman, overhearing this, popped his head up from behind a control panel. That was me. And technically it's still a microwave, it just microwaves things from a distance, very therapeutic for space combat. The transformation was staggering. Aircraft carriers sprouted fusion drives like metallic wings. Tank battalions received pressurized compartments and magnetic clamps for zero-gravity operations. Even garbage scows were retrofitted with missile systems because, as Jake explained in space, no one can hear you throw things at the enemy. Chancellor Globert, watching a team of humans install what appeared to be a barbecue grill on a military transport, finally asked the question that had been bothering him. "Commander, why does that vessel require cooking facilities?" "Chancellor, you can't fight a war on an empty stomach. Besides, nothing says we're confident about winning quite like planning your victory barbecue before the battle starts." By the end of the 3rd month, Earth's orbital space looked like a junkyard had collided with a weapons factory and somehow achieved sentience. Every piece of human engineering had been conscripted into service, modified beyond recognition, and armed to the teeth. The aliens watched in fascination and growing terror as humanity prepared for war with the casual efficiency of a species that had been perfecting the art of organized violence for millennia. "Commander," Claxon asked quietly, "are you certain this is necessary?" Jake looked out at the fleet of 12,000 vessels that represented everything from repurposed fishing boats to nuclear submarines with aftermarket space drives, and smiled. "Admiral, when humans solve a problem, we don't just solve it. We solve it so thoroughly that the problem apologizes for existing." The human fleet's arrival at the Kepler 442 system could best be described as what happens when a meteor shower decides to become aggressively social. The Vorthan Empire, which had been methodically strip mining the local planets with their usual crystalline efficiency, it suddenly found their sensors registering contacts that defied every known law of military logistics. Vorthan Fleet Commander Zixthul, a being of pure geometric perfection and mathematical precision, stared at his tactical display with what could charitably be described as confusion. "Navigation officer, please confirm sensor readings." "Commander, sensors indicate approximately 12,000 hostile vessels approaching from 17 different vectors. The formation pattern appears to be random." "Random? That's impossible. No military force operates with random formations." "Sir, I'm also detecting what appears to be civilian vessels mixed in with military craft. Some readings suggest cruise ships, fishing trawlers, and what our database identifies as recreational vehicles." Zixthul's crystalline structure flickered with irritation. "Navigation officer, you're telling me we're facing a fleet of tourists and fishermen." Meanwhile, aboard the command vessel used definitely not overkill. Commander Jake Henderson was enjoying what he called the moment of truth. The ship's name had been Rita Garcia's idea, and Jake had approved it because it made him laugh every time he saw it on official documents. The commander came the voice of Admiral Claxon over the con. The Vorthan fleet has taken defensive positions. They appear to be waiting for you to announce your intentions. Rita, open a channel to the Vorthan fleet. Channel open, sir. Jake leaned back in his command chair, which was actually a repurposed recliner from a retired aircraft carrier. Attention, Vorthan fleet. This is Commander Jake Henderson of the United Earth Space Forces. You guys picked a fight with our friends, and we're here to discuss your life choices. The response came in a voice that sounded like a computer trying to be intimidating. Human vessel. I am Fleet Commander Zixthul of the Vorthan Empire. You are vastly outnumbered and technologically inferior. Withdraw immediately or face annihilation. Outnumbered? Jake looked around at his bridge crew, all of whom were grinning like kids on Christmas morning. Rita, how many ships did we bring again? 12,047, sir. That's not counting the support vessels. And how many ships do the Vorthans have? According to sensors, approximately 800. Jake keyed the comm again. Commander Zixthul, I think you might want to check your math. Also, you might want to reconsider your definition of technologically inferior. The battle began exactly as every military strategist would have predicted, which is to say it immediately descended into chaos that would have made Sun Tzu throw up his hands and take up gardening. The Vorthans opened with their standard tactic, a perfectly coordinated assault using mathematical precision and optimal firing solutions. It was beautiful, efficient, and completely useless against an enemy that responded by attacking from 17 different directions, while playing what appeared to be Earth's most annoying music at maximum volume. Sir, reported the US definitely not overkill's tactical officer, the enemy appears confused by our strategy. That's because we don't have a strategy, Jake replied cheerfully. We have 12,000 individual captains all making it up as they go along. It's like jazz, but with explosions. The Vorthan fleet, which had conquered half the galaxy through predictable, efficient warfare, have found themselves facing an enemy that apparently learned military tactics from action movies and fever dreams. Human pilots performed maneuvers that violated several laws of physics and common sense, while simultaneously broadcasting a playlist that included everything from death metal to children's lullabies. Captain Murphy, commanding the retrofitted Coast Guard cutter Semper Paratus, found himself facing 3 Vorthan destroyers. His response was to ram the nearest one while deploying what he cheerfully called space depth charges. Murphy to all vessels, he broadcast, apparently these crystal boys don't like it when you hit them with things. Who knew? Dr. Kellerman, aboard his personal command vessel Use Mad Science, was having the time of his life testing his latest modifications. Jake, the microwave cannon works perfectly. I just cooked their shielding from the inside out. The Vorthans, meanwhile, they were discovering that their perfect tactical computers couldn't calculate responses to an enemy that seemed to make decisions based on randomness and sheer audacity. The commander, the Vorthan navigation officer, reported, the humans appear to be using garbage scows as missile platforms. That's impossible. Garbage scows can't function as military vessels. Sir, one of them just launched what appears to be actual garbage at our formation. The debris is interfering with our targeting systems. Zixthul stared at his tactical display as his perfectly ordered battle formation was systematically dismantled by what could only be described as organized chaos with a soundtrack. Sir, his communications officer announced, we're receiving another transmission from the human commander. Jake to Vorthan fleet, came Henderson's voice, still cheerful despite the ongoing battle. You guys want to surrender now? Or should we break out the really weird stuff? The Vorthan Empire had conquered 47% of the galaxy using a simple principle: wars were mathematical problems with violent solutions. Apply sufficient force with optimal efficiency, and victory was inevitable. This philosophy had served them well for 3 centuries, right up until they encountered a species that treated mathematics as a suggestion and violence as an art form. Fleet Commander Zexthul watched his tactical display with growing bewilderment as his perfectly coordinated fleet was systematically dismantled by what could only be described as a weaponized insanity. Navigation officer, explain to me how a fishing vessel just disabled one of our battle cruisers. Sir, the vessel appears to have deployed some form of net weapon that tangled our engine assemblies. When we attempted to break free, they activated what their database identifies as a fish stunner that overloaded our shield generators. They're fishing for us. It appears so, sir. Meanwhile, Captain Murphy was indeed having the time of his life. Attention all vessels. This is Murphy. If you're going to catch space fish, you need the right bait. I recommend high explosive lures. The problem, Zexthul was beginning to realize, wasn't that humans were technologically superior. They weren't. Their ships were held together with what appeared to be enthusiasm and spare parts. The problem was that humans didn't fight wars the way wars were supposed to be fought. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're detecting some form of psychological warfare broadcast from the human fleet. Analysis? It appears to be a song about a fish called Baby Shark, sir. Our crew is reporting decreased morale and requests to make it stop. Zexthul's crystalline structure dimmed with what could be interpreted as a headache. They're using children's music as a weapon. It's surprisingly effective, sir. Across the battlefield, Lieutenant Garcia was coordinating what she called statistically improbable victory conditions. Her calculations had determined that the Vorthans were predictable to a fault, which meant they could be defeated by being unpredictable to a fault. Attention all vessels, she broadcast, execute maneuver Delta 77. Rita, Jake asked over the con. What's maneuver Delta 77? I have no idea, sir. I just made it up, but watch what happens. 12,000 human captains, faced with an order they didn't understand, did what humans do best, they improvised. The result was a coordinated attack that looked like random chaos, but somehow managed to perfectly exploit every weakness in the Vorthan formation. The US Pacific Princess, still operating its buffet service during combat, found itself surrounded by 3 Vorthan cruisers. Captain Williams, a former cruise director turned military commander, handled the situation with the same customer service skills he'd used to manage vacation complaints. Attention Vorthan vessels, he announced cheerfully. This is Captain Williams. Would you be interested in our lunch special? Today we're serving surrender with a side of not getting blown up. The Vorthan response was a coordinated missile barrage. Well, Williams sighed, some people just don't appreciate fine dining. He then deployed the ship's entertainment system, which Dr. Kellerman had modified to project holographic images of everything from dancing lobsters to what appeared to be Earth's most embarrassing family vacation photos. The psychological effect on the precision-minded Vorthans was devastating. Dr. Kellerman, meanwhile, was testing his latest creation, a weapon that could only be described as a disco ball of doom. The device projected rainbow lights while simultaneously jamming enemy sensors and playing what he called therapeutic combat music. Jake, he reported with obvious glee. The Vorthans appear to be allergic to fun. Every time I hit them with the disco ball, their formations fall apart. The truth was that the Vorthans weren't losing because humans were better warriors. They were losing because humans fought like humans. Indishi. And no amount of mathematical precision could account for a species that considered hold my beer and watch this to be a valid military strategy. Sir, the Vorthan tactical officer reported, the humans appear to be using their damaged vessels as projectiles. Explain. Explain. When their ships are disabled, they ram them into our formations while the crew evacuates via escape pods. The pods then deploy additional weapons. Zexthul stared at the tactical display as another human vessel, listing badly and trailing debris, accelerated directly toward his flagship while broadcasting what sounded like a victory song. They're celebrating while their ship is exploding. It appears so, sir. The escape pods are also playing music. That's when Zexthul realized the fundamental truth about humanity. They didn't just fight wars, they enjoyed them. And somehow that joy was more terrifying than any weapon they carried. The Vorthan surrender came not with a bang, but with what could only be described as a very polite cough over the communication channels. Fleet Commander Zixthul, his crystalline structure now flickering with what humans would recognize as nervous exhaustion, finally acknowledged what his tactical computers had been trying to tell him for the past 6 hours. This was not a battle. It was a masterclass in why you don't pick fights with species that weaponize their entertainment industry. Human Commander Henderson. Zixthul's voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of military pride being systematically dismantled by beings who used garbage scows as missile platforms. The Vorthan Empire wishes to discuss terms of surrender. Jake, who was currently watching Dr. Kellerman's latest experiment involving a weaponized karaoke machine, nearly choked on his coffee. "I'm sorry, did you say surrender? We were just getting warmed up." "Commander, your forces have demonstrated capabilities that our tactical analyses cannot account for. We formally request cessation of hostilities and are prepared to discuss terms." Rita Garcia, whose calculations had predicted this moment with startling accuracy, leaned over to Jake. "Sir, I think they're scared of us." "Rita, they should be scared of us. Captain Murphy just turned a fishing trawler into a siege weapon, and Dr. Kellerman is currently playing My Heart Will Go On at frequencies that interfere with their neural patterns. The peace negotiations, if they could be called that, took place aboard the US, definitely not overkill, with representatives from the Galactic Federation Council observing via hologram. Admiral Claxon looked like he'd aged several decades in the past few hours, while Chancellor Globert appeared to be reconsidering every life choice that had led to this moment. "The terms are simple," Jake explained to the assembled representatives, his feet propped up on what used to be a conference table and was now serving as a snack distribution center. "The Vorthan Empire stops conquering people, returns the territories they've taken, and maybe considers a hobby that doesn't involve interstellar warfare." Zixthul's crystalline form flickered with what might have been confusion. "Hey, Commander Henderson, do you not wish to claim victory spoils or territorial concessions? What would we do with half the galaxy? We've barely figured out how to manage one planet without starting wars over parking spaces. Then what do you want?" Jake considered this question while munching on what appeared to be a sandwich that had been engineered for zero gravity consumption. "Honestly, we just want everyone to get along. Maybe trade some technology, share some recipes, and avoid any more situations where people feel the need to conquer entire star systems." Unit 47, processing this exchange, finally spoke up. "Commander Henderson, your species' approach to conflict resolution appears to be based on overwhelming force followed by aggressive friendship." Unit 47, "That's the most accurate description of human foreign policy I've ever heard." The Galactic Federation Council, still trying to process what they'd witnessed, made the only logical decision they could under the circumstances. They offered humanity full membership in the Federation, along with a permanent seat on the Security Council. Jake's response was to shrug and ask, "Do you guys know where we can get good barbecue around here? All this peacemaking has worked up an appetite." Within a week, word of humanity's intervention had spread throughout the galaxy. The story grew with each telling, until humans were described as beings who could weaponize literally anything and somehow maintained a cheerful attitude while doing so. Several minor conflicts were resolved when both sides agreed that they'd rather negotiate than risk having humans show up with creative solutions. The Vorthan Empire, meanwhile, discovered that humans made surprisingly good friends once you stopped trying to conquer their allies. Fleet Commander Zixthul found himself invited to Dr. Kellerman's laboratory, where he learned that humans approach science with the same chaotic enthusiasm they brought to warfare. "Dr. Kellerman," Zixthul observed, watching the scientist attach what appeared to be a food processor to a fusion reactor, "your species seems to approach all problems with similar methodology." "Zixthul, my friend, the secret to human success is simple. If something doesn't work, add more power and see what happens. If it still doesn't work, add music and explosives. This explains much about your military doctrine." Admiral Claxon, reviewing reports from the aftermath, found himself in an unexpected position. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in centuries, and it was all because everyone was terrified of accidentally annoying the humans. Unit 47, he asked during a council meeting, what's the current status of interstellar conflicts? Conflicts are down by 97%. Admiral, most potential aggressors have decided that diplomacy is preferable to risking human intervention. And the humans? They appear to be hosting barbecue competitions on their orbital platforms and have extended invitations to all Federation members. Chancellor Globert, still trying to understand how everything had worked out so well, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Unit 47, how did a species that hadn't achieved interstellar travel 6 months ago become the galaxy's most effective peacekeeping force? Unit 47's optical sensors flickered as he processed the question. Analysis suggests that humans don't keep peace through diplomacy or wisdom, Chancellor. They keep peace by making war so interesting that everyone else is too scared to find out what they'll think of next. And that's how humanity accidentally became the galaxy's peacekeepers, not through superior technology or advanced wisdom, but through the simple fact that when humans solve problems, they solve them so thoroughly that the problems apologize for existing and recommend their friends try diplomacy instead. Jake Henderson, now holding the title of Galactic Security Consultant, and still wearing his lucky Hawaiian shirt to diplomatic functions, summarized humanity's new role perfectly. We're not the heroes the galaxy wanted, but apparently we're the heroes the galaxy needed. Now, who wants to try Rita's famous zero-gravity chili?